I know I have no right to ask you this.
You have no right. You are correct about that.
Our son is dying, Amara. The doctor said you are the only one in this region who has treated this condition before.
I know what the doctor said. I read his file 3 days ago when they admitted him.
Then you already knew it was our child.
I knew the moment I saw his name on the admission list.
Then why didn't you tell me?
I am a doctor, Chuka. I came because he is 8 years old and he is not responsible for what you and Ifeoma did to me.
The hospital corridor held that particular silence that falls when something true has been said in a place that usually only hears careful language. Outside the window, the city moved on as cities always do, without knowledge of or interest in the 8 years now standing between 3 people in a hallway. To understand how a doctor could choose to save the child of the 2 people who had broken her completely, you have to go back to the beginning of a friendship that started at age 7 and ended on a Tuesday afternoon that Amara had never once, in 8 years, managed to stop remembering. Amara and Ifeoma had been friends since primary 2, the year Ifeoma's family moved into the house, 3 compounds down from Amara's on Aba Road in Umuahia. They had been introduced by a shared punishment, both kept behind after class for talking when they should have been copying notes, and had spent the detention period discovering they found the same things funny, which is, in the end, the only foundation a childhood friendship actually requires. For 16 years after that, they had been the kind of friends that small towns produce when 2 girls grow up alongside each other through every stage of becoming a person. They shared clothes, secrets, examination notes, heartbreaks, and the particular shorthand of people who have known each other long enough that full sentences are rarely necessary. When Amara's father died in her 2nd year of secondary school, it was Ifeoma who sat beside her through the entire burial without speaking, who understood that nothing needed to be said and that presence was the only thing that mattered. When Ifeoma failed her WAEC mathematics and was convinced her entire future had ended at 16, it was Amara who tutored her through the resit and sat outside the examination hall on results day with a bottle of Fanta and the absolute certainty that things would be fine. They went to the same university in Enugu, studied different courses, Amara medicine, Ifeoma accounting, and navigated the complicated geography of a campus friendship where 2 people who have always been everything to each other suddenly have separate lives growing alongside the shared one. It required negotiation. It required, occasionally, the deliberate choice to show up even when convenience argued otherwise. They made those choices, both of them, for 4 years, and the friendship survived intact. Chuka arrived in their 3rd year, through Ifeoma, at a faculty social event Amara had not planned to attend and had gone to only because Ifeoma had asked her, specifically, to come. He was a final-year engineering student, quietly funny, with the kind of patience in conversation that made you feel, when he was listening to you, that what you were saying was the most interesting thing happening in any room he had ever been in. Ifeoma had pointed him out across the room and said, with the easy generosity of someone who has no interest in the thing they are offering, that she thought he was exactly Amara's type. She was right. She would spend years insisting she had not known that herself at the time. Amara would spend the same years deciding it did not matter either way. Chuka and Amara were together for 3 years, the kind of relationship that builds itself quietly and without drama into something that becomes the background architecture of 2 people's daily lives. He was present for her first clinical rotation, the week she came home every evening looking like she had been wrung out and left to dry, and he learned, in that week, exactly what kind of presence she needed on a bad day and what kind of space she needed on a worse one. She was present for the engineering project that consumed 4 months of his final year, arriving at his room with food she had cooked herself, sitting quietly in the corner while he worked, not needing him to be available because she understood that some kinds of love express themselves through leaving a person free to do what they need to do. Ifeoma was present for all of it, the way a best friend is present for a relationship that belongs to the person she loves most in the world. She attended the small celebrations, heard the arguments described from one side, offered the counsel of someone who knew both people well enough to be fair to neither and honest to both. She was, Amara thought, in those 3 years, the best version of what a friend could be inside someone else's love story. What Amara did not see, because she was not looking for it, and because Ifeoma was, in her way, careful, was that Ifeoma had stopped being merely present and had become something else, something with a weight and a direction that careful presence does not usually carry. She saw it. Later, in details she had not known to collect at the time. The particular way Ifeoma laughed at Chuka's jokes, louder and longer than the jokes usually warranted. The way she touched his arm when making a point, a habit she did not have with anyone else. The way she volunteered, often, to be the one to pass messages between them when Amara was in a particularly demanding rotation and her phone was largely unreachable. None of it was legible on its own. All of it, assembled afterward, made a picture so clear it was almost insulting. Amara finished her afternoon ward round 40 minutes early on a Tuesday in November, the kind of small gift a hospital occasionally offers when the universe has decided, in advance, that a person needs to be somewhere specific at a specific time. She called Chuka twice on the walk to his hostel. He did not pick up. She assumed he was in a lecture and kept walking. She knocked at his door without announcing herself because she had never needed to, because 3 years had made his door as much hers as any door she had ever had a key to. The door was unlocked. She opened it. She would not afterward describe what she saw in detail to anyone. Not to her mother, not to the one other friend she told, not to herself in the quiet of her own mind when the memory arrived uninvited, which it did, for years, at entirely inconvenient moments. What she would say, when she said anything at all, was only that she had understood everything in the first 2 seconds, before either of them had moved or spoken, with the complete, airless clarity of a thing that cannot be unseen or made into anything other than exactly what it is. Ifeoma said her name. Just her name, the way a person says a name when no sentence is available that could possibly follow it. Amara closed the door. She walked back through the campus, past the faculty building and the library and the small canteen where she and Ifeoma had eaten rice together every Wednesday for 3 years, and she kept walking until she reached her own hostel room, where she sat on the edge of her bed and did not move for a very long time. Chuka came that evening, then Ifeoma, then Chuka again. She did not open the door for any of them. What she wanted, in those hours, was the simple dignity of processing this alone, without having to manage anyone else's guilt or explanation or apology inside the same space where she was trying to determine whether the floor was still solid underneath her. The explanations came eventually, over the following days, in fragments that assembled themselves into a story she had not been present for. It had been happening for 4 months. Neither of them had planned it. Both of them were sorry. Chuka said he had been confused about his feelings. Ifeoma said she had not known how to tell her and kept waiting for a moment that never came. Amara listened to all of it with the particular stillness of someone who has already decided that the words, however carefully arranged, are not actually going to change what the hands have already done. She did not shout. She did not weep in front of either of them. She told Chuka, plainly, that they were finished. She told Ifeoma, plainly, that she needed her to understand that 16 years of friendship did not survive what had just happened to them, and that she did not hate her, but that she also could not continue, and that those two things were both true at the same time, and she was not going to pretend otherwise to make either of them more comfortable. Ifeoma wept. She said she was sorry more times than the word sorry is able to carry. Amara told her she believed her and meant it, and that it did not change anything. She transferred to a different clinical placement the following week, one that required relocating to a teaching hospital in Enugu. She finished her degree there, qualified there, and began building a life in a city that had no shared history with either of them. Amara threw herself into medicine with the focused intensity of someone who has decided that competence is a more reliable comfort than anything the world has previously offered. She specialized in pediatric infectious diseases, a field that required everything she had and then asked for more, and she gave it, because giving everything to something that needed it was, she discovered, one of the few things that reliably made the rest of the world feel temporarily manageable. She became good, then very good. Then, the kind of good that meant other doctors called her specifically from other hospitals about cases they could not fully interpret because she had developed an understanding of rare pediatric conditions that most practitioners in the region simply had not encountered in sufficient volume to recognize quickly. She did not think about Chuka or Ifeoma often, not because she had forgiven them easily, but because she had learned, over 8 years of treating small children in genuine medical crisis, that the personal indulgence of sustained bitterness was a luxury her patients could not afford her. She put the Tuesday away in the same place she put every other difficult thing, in a compartment she could access when necessary and close when her hands were needed elsewhere. She heard, through the distant channels that connect people who share an origin city, that Chuka and Ifeoma had married 2 years after she left, that they had a son, that Chuka had built a decent engineering practice in Umuahia, and Ifeoma had joined her family's accounting firm, that by all visible measures they had made a life, and that the life appeared, from the outside, to be a reasonable one. She felt, when she heard these things, the residual ache of old damage, the way a healed break sometimes responds to weather. She did not feel hatred. She had examined that possibility carefully over the years and found that it cost more than it returned. What she had not anticipated was the admission list. She saw it on a Thursday morning, running through the new admissions on her ward before rounds. A 8-year-old male, named Tobe, admitted with a presentation that the admitting physician had flagged as unusual, a combination of symptoms that pointed toward one of the rarer pediatric conditions she had spent years developing specific expertise in. She read the name twice. Then she read the father's contact number listed on the file. She recognized it immediately. Some numbers stay in the memory long after they have stopped being useful. She sat with the file for several minutes. The child had been admitted the previous evening. He was febrile, confused at intervals, presenting with a symptom cluster that the admitting team had not yet fully characterized. Without correct identification of the underlying condition and the specific treatment protocol it required, the prognosis within 72 hours was serious. She picked up the file and walked to the ward. She did not call Chuka. She examined the child first, thoroughly, with the same focused attention she brought to every patient, because the child had done nothing and was 8 years old and was not responsible for the circumstances of his parents. By the time Chuka arrived at the hospital that afternoon, she had already made the diagnosis, ordered the specific medication regime the condition required, and spoken to the nursing staff about the monitoring protocol for the next 24 hours. Chuka saw her before she saw him. She heard him say her name from 10 feet away, with a particular quality in his voice she recognized, the sound of someone encountering something they had stopped expecting. She turned. He looked older, not badly. The way men look when the years have replaced some of the ease of youth with something more considered. He looked, she noticed, frightened in the specific way of a parent with a sick child, the fear that strips everything else away and leaves only the single largest thing. She told him the diagnosis. She explained the treatment protocol. She answered his questions clearly and without warmth or coldness, with the professional precision of someone who has separated what the situation requires from what the history between them might feel entitled to. Then, Ifeoma arrived. Ifeoma looked at her in a way that contained everything 16 years of friendship and 8 years of its absence could compress into a single expression. She said her name the same way she had said it the first time, in a doorway, years ago, when no sentence existed that could follow it. Amara told them both what she had told Chuka. Then she told them she would be managing the case personally, and that their son was in the best possible hands, which was true, and which she said not to comfort them specifically, but because it was accurate, and they had a right to the accurate information. She turned to go back to the ward. Chuka called her name. She stopped. He said he knew he had no right to ask anything of her. She told him he was correct. He said their son was dying and she was the only one in the region who had treated this condition before. She told him she had read the file 3 days ago when the child was admitted. He asked whether she had already known whose child it was. She said she had known from the moment she saw the name. He asked whether she had come anyway. She told him she was a doctor and that the child was 8 years old and that he was not responsible for what his parents had done to her and that he should step aside and let her do her work. The boy recovered. Not dramatically, not in the space of a single night, but steadily, over 11 days, the way children recover when the correct treatment is administered at the right time by someone who knows exactly what they are doing. Amara monitored his progress with the same attention she brought to every patient, adjusting the protocol as the clinical picture evolved, consulting with colleagues in Lagos and Abuja on 2 specific aspects of the presentation where additional expertise was warranted. She did not have further personal conversations with Chuka or Ifeoma during the admission. She communicated with them as she communicated with every parent of a patient in her care, clearly, accurately, with appropriate compassion for their fear without any collapse of professional distance. She was, by every measure a hospital could apply, exactly the doctor the child needed. On the 9th day, the boy's fever broke for the final time. On the 11th day, the ward round confirmed he was ready for discharge. Amara signed the discharge paperwork herself and handed it to the nurse. Ifeoma was waiting in the corridor when she came out. She did not try to explain herself again, which was wise because Amara had already heard the explanation and understood it to its full extent and had made her peace with it across 8 long years of work and distance. Instead, Ifeoma said only that she understood why Amara had come, and that it was the most honest thing she had ever witnessed anyone do, and that she did not expect anything in return for the saying of it. Amara looked at her for a moment. She told her that she had come because the child needed a doctor, and that she was a doctor, and that those 2 facts were the only ones that had been relevant to her decision. She told her she wished her family well, and that she meant it, and that she hoped they would not meet again in a professional context or any other one. She walked back to her office. She had 3 other patients to review before the afternoon ward round began, and the work, as always, was waiting. That evening, Amara sat in her office after the last round was done and allowed herself, for the first time since the admission list, a moment of stillness that was not organized around a task. She thought about the Tuesday in November, about the door she had closed, about the long walk back across campus and the years that had followed it. She thought about the boy's face on the first day, the fever and the confusion, and the particular relief of a correct diagnosis made early enough to matter. She had not saved the child for Chuka or Ifeoma. She had not saved him to prove something about her own character, or to demonstrate a forgiveness she had not entirely felt, or to perform the kind of grace that earns admiration. She had saved him because he was 8 years old and sick, and because she was the person in the building best equipped to help him, and those facts had been sufficient all by themselves, without requiring anything more complex to be true alongside them. What the 8 years had built, she understood sitting there in the quiet of her own office, was not the spectacular architecture of revenge or triumph, but something more durable and less dramatic. They had built a person who could walk into a room containing the worst thing that had ever happened to her and still do the thing the room required. That was not a small thing. It was, in fact, the only kind of strength that had ever mattered, the kind that holds when it is actually tested rather than only when it is performing. She turned off the office light. She had an early start the next morning. A new patient was being admitted overnight, a 4-year-old from a town 3 hours away, whose parents had driven through the night because someone had told them this was the doctor to see. She would be there when they arrived. If you stayed with this story until the very end, leave a comment telling us where you are watching from and subscribe so you never miss the next one.